welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel we look at microfiche from the past, old newspaper articles in the public domain. We look at them with our modern eyes, our modern perspective, and see what we can learn from them. On this microfiche time capsule, we are looking back at the Biographical Encyclopedia, Volume 1, and this article is entitled Benson, Ezra Taft. And we are not talking about Ezra Taft Benson today because we already did a video on him. It was rather long, intricate video, a lot of information. And this time we are talking about Ezra T. Benson. He is referred to in the church as Ezra T. Benson. He was the great-grandfather, I believe, of Ezra Taft Benson, who was named after him. And that's why they have the exact same name. And that's why Ezra Taft Benson goes by Ezra Taft and not Ezra T, because his great-grandfather already took the name Ezra T. Benson. Yeah. So that's actually why. It's just similar with George A. Smith and George Albert Smith, or Joseph F. Smith and Joseph Fielding Smith. Yeah. Like, they both have the same name. They just, one is younger than the other. So the younger one has to write their name all the way out. And so this is just another one of those. Anyway, Ezra T. Benson was, I believe, the first apostle called by Brigham Young. It's a little bit confusing because it looks kind of like Amasa Lyman was the first one called by Brigham Young, but he wasn't. He was called by Joseph Smith. But the reason is that Amasa Lyman was called by Joseph Smith in 1842 to replace people who had left, and then several of them came back. And because they had come back, then there was suddenly no more room for Amasa Lyman in the quorum, and so he was kind of put on hold, until there was space for him in the quorum again. And so he was the next one on the list to come back to the quorum after other people left or were excommunicated afterwards, and several of them were. So Ezra T. Benson was the first person to be called by Brigham Young officially, 1846. So what do I know about him? He was, I believe, somebody who liked to write down things and keep a journal. He was very, very involved in the migration to Utah. I'm pretty sure he was a polygamist because basically everybody in the Quorum of the 12 was at the time. But I don't know a lot about his progeny except for Ezra Taft Benson. Let's see. I think that he wrote an account of his pioneer journeys several times, to the point that it's very clear what happened to him. And so this article isn't super long. I would say it's medium length for Biographical Encyclopedia, but if you want to hear more about him, then on my website, there's a whole list of articles on him, half of which he wrote himself. They were published significantly later. I think it was the 1940s, I want to say. Yeah, 1945 and 1946. And there is a list of, let's see how many of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 articles on him. So I just feel like if I had started reading those, it would literally take me 4 hours to read them all. So even though, sometimes I pick Biographical Encyclopedia because it's the only article we have. Sometimes I pick Biographical Encyclopedia because it's more comprehensive than some of the other articles, which were much shorter. Sometimes I pick Biographical Encyclopedia because it is shorter, and this is one of those cases. I want to keep this in a relatively compact amount of time, and if I started reading all of these articles, it would take me forever. So these are articles, it's a series of articles, one after the other, that were published in the Instructor in the 1940s. So if you are interested in learning more about Ezra T. Benson, I would recommend reading those, because that is very, very detailed and goes very much in depth into his experiences. But we are not doing that today because that's too much for this type of a video. So we are looking at the Biographical Encyclopedia article instead, which is more of a summary and then we will fact check with Wikipedia as usual, which is very, very short once again. So, but hopefully we can get enough good information. If there's anything, like any big question marks left open, we can briefly glance at some of the longer articles, I guess series of articles. Anyway, so let's take a look at the article. Benson, Ezra Taft, a member of the Council of 12 Apostles from 1846 to 1869, was the first son of John and Chloe Benson, and was born February 22nd, 1811, in Mendon, Worcester County, Massachusetts. His father was a farmer and a very industrious man, a quality which his son inherited, and Ezra T. lived with him, helping him on the farm until he was 16 years old. He then went to live with his sister and her husband, who were keeping a hotel in the center of the town of Uxbridge. With them he remained 3 years. His grandfather Benson was also a farmer, and while engaged at work in the field, he fell and suddenly died. Oh, that's sad. That must have been heart issues, yeah? If he was working at the time that he suddenly died. At the death of his grandfather, by the request of his grandmother, young Ezra T. took charge of the farm. Okay, and when 20 years old, he married Pamelia? Pamela. Pamelia. Huh. I'm not sure if that's misspelled or not. But yeah, Pamelia, the daughter of Jonathan H. and Lucina Andrus of Northbridge, Worcester County, Massachusetts. Okay. In 1832, he moved from the farm and bought out his brother-in-law, the hotel keeper, and kept the house about 2 years. All right, there's a picture. I don't know if this is a very good picture of him, but it's the only one he doesn't look like kind of sad. Like, he had this habit of, like, letting his face completely drop, which I know was a thing back then because you had to stay still for so long. But he always looks a little bit sad, a little bit depressed in his picture. And I don't know that he was, but it does come across that way. It might just be the Victorian style, but this one is the only one he doesn't really look like that, but it's very fuzzy. It's hard to see anything at all, so very low on detail there. In this business, he made considerable money, the hotel business, yeah, which he invested in hiring a cotton mill and commencing with his wife's brother the manufacture of cotton in the town of Holland, Massachusetts. Through a combination of causes over which he had no control, he lost money in this business, and retiring from it took a hotel in the same town. Maybe he just underestimated how much his costs would be, you know? He was also appointed postmaster. Though he made money in this business, he could not be content. He had a desire to visit the West. Okay. In the spring of 1837, he had his family, I think they mean he and his family started. That's just a straight up typo, I think. He and his family started. While in Philadelphia, he made the acquaintance of a gentleman who spoke discouragingly about the West and persuaded him to go to the town of Salem, and he would assist him to go into business. Salem, Massachusetts, I guess? That's weird, because he specifically said he wanted to go west, so I don't know. Just don't stop him, let him go, jeez. He remained in this place 1 year, and though his neighbors offered to render him any assistance he might need to establish himself in business, he still yearned for the West, and he started in that direction. See, as an immigrant myself, I can attest to the fact that when you are ready to leave, you can't really be stopped. Like, you just feel this burning desire to leave. And, like, once you're in a place where you feel confident and comfortable, then that calms down almost immediately. So like, the people being like, no, stay here, like, come on, let the man go where he wants to go, you know? He touched at St. Louis. I don't know what that means. Like, did he stop there briefly, I guess? Obtained a small stock of goods, and then went up the Illinois River, not knowing where he should land. But while on the river, he made the acquaintance of a man who proved to be his father's cousin. He was living at Griggsville, Illinois, and at that town he concluded to stop. But he did not remain there long. Okay, this is really confusing, you know. He moved to Lexington in the same state, and afterwards to the mouth of the Little Blue, where he and a man by the name of Isaac Hill laid out a town and called it Pike. Huh. Was that his ambition, to, like, start a new town? 'Cause that's a lot of work. Here he built himself a dwelling house and a warehouse. but the place was sickly and he was restless. In relation to these days, he afterwards said that he felt the Lord was preparing him for the future which awaited him, and later could understand why he could not feel contented in the various places where he visited, and where, so far as worldly prospects were concerned, he had every opportunity of doing well. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I'm telling you, once you feel a call towards a place, you can't ignore it. Early in 1839, he heard of Quincy, Illinois, and he was led to go there in search of a home. That's right at the same time the Saints were leaving Missouri, and they came to Quincy, Illinois, which they turned into Nauvoo. It's interesting to me that he went there at the exact same time. And he was led to go there in search of a home. There he met with the Latter-day Saints, who had just been driven out of Missouri by mob violence. Yeah. He heard they were a very peculiar people, yet in listening to the preaching of their elders, and in conversation with themselves, he found them very agreeable. He boarded during the winter with a family of Latter-day Saints, and formed a high opinion of them. In the spring of 1840, he secured 2 acres of land in the town, fenced it in, and built a house upon it. During this time, he still associated with the Latter-day Saints, and his sympathies were much moved toward them, and he held conversations with them about their principles. But he wasn't baptized yet, yeah? He had been there for a year and hadn't been baptized, so that's already interesting. Because a lot of the other people we've been reading about, I mean, none of them were born in the church. I think the first person who was born in the church was Joseph F. Smith, as far as, like, leadership goes. So, like, them learning about the church and being baptized was kind of a fast thing. That's something that just happened, really quickly, one after the other. So it surprises me that for him it wasn't quick. And I guess for Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball, they both took 2 years. But at the same time, it does surprise me that surrounded by a large group of saints and living in their community, and that he wasn't baptized immediately. I guess we've had a couple people who weren't, but it surprises me that he was one of them. So, wow. A debate was held in Quincy between the Latter-day Saints and Dr. Nelson, who was opposed to them, at which the prophet Joseph was present. From this debate, he became convinced that the Latter-day Saints were believers in and observers of the truth of the Bible. Though pleased that the Saints had come up victorious, he had no idea at the time that he would ever become one himself. See, he wasn't even going in that direction at that point. Yet their principles were the chief topic of conversation with himself and family and neighbors, and he and his wife attended their meetings. His wife was the first to avow her belief in the doctrines, and when the word went out that they were believers in what was called Mormonism, a strong effort was made to get him to join a sectarian church. Okay, so they had, like, missionaries from, like, the local, Presbyterians come over? Wow. That's interesting. So they're, like, fighting over him. Dude, just let the man decide. See, I feel like too many people are trying to influence this guy. Dude, let the man make his own decisions, Elders Orson Hyde and John E. Page visited Quincy about this time, having started on their mission to Jerusalem, to which they had been appointed. Their preaching seemed to have the effect to remove whatever doubts there were remaining. Really? And he and his wife were baptized by the president of the Quincy branch, July 19th, 1840. Good for them. Well, that's really cool. I like that story. Orson Pratt and Johnny Page were like, hi, let me tell you about it. In the fall, he went to the Conference of Nauvoo and was ordained an elder. After his return to Quincy, he was visited by President Hiram Smith, who ordained him a high priest, October 25th, 1840, and appointed him to be second counselor to the president of the stake, which he had organized there. About the 1st of April, 1841, he moved to Nauvoo. He bought a lot, fenced and improved it, and built a log house upon it. June 1st, 1842, he started on a mission to the eastern states, where he remained until the fall of 1843. He returned and remained until May 1844, when he again started east in company with Elder John Pack. When the news of the death of Joseph, the prophet, reached them, they returned. Okay. That fall, he was called to be a member of the High Council in Nauvoo, and in December of that year was again sent east on a mission. He presided over the Boston Conference until the beginning of May 1845, when he was counseled to gather up all the saints who could go and move them out of Nauvoo. The remainder of that summer and fall he worked on the temple, and at night frequently stood guard to keep off the mob. He moved out of Nauvoo with his family in the first company in 1846. Yeah, he led basically the group going out of the city, and I'm fairly certain that he did a lot to help the Saints get across the plains. Like that was his main thing that I remember him for. At Mount Pisgah, he was appointed a counselor to Father William Huntington. While at this place, he received a letter from President Young informing him of his appointment to the Quorum of the 12 instead of Johnny Page. Yeah, because Johnny Page wasn't really willing to go the rest of the way. We've already talked about him 2 weeks ago. I called him a reluctant missionary. He just didn't really want to be there. He moved up to the main camp at Council Bluffs, where he was ordained to the apostleship July 16th, 1846, by Brigham Young. Shortly afterwards, he was sent east on a mission, from which he returned November 27th, 1846, so 6 months. The next spring, well, not even 6 months, that's what, 4 months? 4 months. The next spring, he accompanied President Young as one of the pioneers to Great Salt Lake Valley. And after their arrival there, he was sent back to meet the companies which were coming on to inform them that a place of settlement had been found. Yeah, so because they left, they just started walking, basically. They're like, I don't no idea where we're going to end up. I hope we find a place that we can be happy. And then you have that famous "this is the place" thing from Brigham Young, where he put his cane in the ground. And there's even a monument there today, if you're interested. But that means that the rest of the people who were coming didn't actually know where they were going. They were just following. They're like, I guess we're going this way, but he came back and was like, oh, by the way, we've decided where we're going. Here we go. Here's your destination. Thank you so much. After he met the companies, he returned to the valley and then started back to winter quarters with the pioneers. Another mission east had to be performed, and he left the camp about the last day of 1847 and was absent several months. Okay, so he left December 1847 and came back, what, March-ish, 1848? Upon his return, he was appointed to preside in Pottawatomie County, Iowa, being associated with President Orson Hyde and George A. Smith. In fact, there's a whole general conference that was conducted with just the three of them, Ezra T. Benson, Orson Hyde, and George A. Smith, as being the presiding elders there. And that's the only conference we have any record of during that time, because the one in Salt Lake wasn't written down. It just wasn't recorded. So, at least not as far as I'm aware. If you ever find one, let me know, and I would love to add it to my website, because, by the way, I am celebrating really quickly, just a quick interjection, is that I have finished all of the general conferences up on my website. So it is now complete with all of the historical general conferences that are not on the church website, which means everything from 1830 through 1970. So if you are interested in any of those, take a look. Historical General Conferences at Weebly.com. Yeah, and so anyway, I'm really, really proud of that, and I just want to celebrate really quickly because I just barely finished it. And I'm very, very happy that it's complete now. So anyway, that took literally 12 years. So, but at least it was worth doing, right? Anything worth doing. All right. Back to the article. Sorry about that. In 1849, in company with George A. Smith, he moved to the valley. He was dangerously sick on the road and was not expected to live. Wow. But the camp fasted and prayed for him, and he recovered. Yeah, because he didn't die then. He died several years later, many years later. In 1851, he left the valley on a mission to Pottawatomie County to gather up the saints and returned in August 1852. In 1856, he was appointed a mission to Europe and, with Elder Orson Pratt, presided over the British mission until the fall of 1857, when he returned home. In 1860, he was appointed to preside in Cache Valley, at which point he continued to reside until his death, with Apostle Lorenzo Snow and accompanied by Elders Joseph F. Smith, William W. Clough, and Alma L. Smith. He went on a mission to the Sandwich Islands in 1864. Okay. And the boat in which they were landing on one of the islands capsized. Oh, I know this story. And the brothers Benson and Snow were almost miraculously saved from drowning, having successfully... Okay, I'm going to stop there for a second because I do know this story told from the perspective of Joseph F. Smith, I believe, who had been to, well, they call the Sandwich Islands, it's Hawaii. He had been to the Hawaiian Islands on a mission like not that long ago, and so he was familiar enough with the area to be kind of a semi-expert on it, and he warned them, don't go into it right now because the winds aren't favorable. Like, it's not safe over there right now. And he warned them. He said, don't go. But the thing is, Lorenzo Snow was the leading authority at the time, and he was the one who made the decision, we're just going to go anyway. And Joseph F. Smith actually refused to get into the little boat with them. And then he watched them capsize. And he was like, oh gosh, I told them not to go in. And then they had to be saved by some of the natives who were watching from the shore. And because they didn't think he was going to make it either. And they were right. And then they had to do the equivalent of CPR at the time for Elder Benson and Lorenzo Snow. And Joseph S. Smith was on the big boat going, they shouldn't have gone. I told you not to do it, because the big boat can't get into the shore. They have to take a little boat in between the shore and the boat, the big boat. And that was the boat that capsized. But actually what Joseph S. Smith had said was that if you just wait a little bit longer, then the native people will come with their boats. They're much more stable in this environment because the winds are too high or whatever I can't remember exactly. But he told them to wait for the native people to come and then they would bring their boats. But it was going to take a couple of hours or something like that. And that they were like, no, we'll be fine in our boat. And Joseph F. Smith was like, no, you won't. And he was right. Yeah. And so I don't really like that story because if they had just listened to Joseph F. Smith in the first place, who knew the area better than them, then they wouldn't have capsized to begin with. A miracle wouldn't have been necessary. You know what I mean? So that's a bit frustrating. I'm glad that the native peoples were able to help them and save their lives, but they owe them a big debt of gratitude, and they owe Joseph F. Smith a huge I'm sorry. You were right. Yeah? Anyway. So I just thought I'd throw that in there. It's really interesting. I have it on the video about Joseph F. Smith and how upset he was when he saw what they were going to do. So, but if you don't have any jurisdiction, and at the time Joseph F. Smith was not an apostle, he wasn't really, or was, if he was, then he was very, very junior, and Lorenzo Snow had seniority. So, what are you going to do? Gosh. Having successfully performed their mission, they returned to Utah, this being the last time Ezra T. Benson left Utah. Besides performing these missions, Elder Benson filled many important missions at home. He was also a member of the Provisional State of Deseret, previous to the organization of the territory, was a member of the Territorial House of Representatives for several sessions, and during the last 10 years of his life, he was elected to the Territorial Council every term. In 1869, he associated himself with brothers Loren Farr and Chauncey W. West in taking a large grading contract on the Central Pacific Railway. Okay, interesting. The fact that he was not able to obtain a settlement with the railway company caused him considerable anxiety. I don't know what that means, obtain a settlement with the railway company? What does that mean? They were going to pay him for the land, I guess, that they needed to go through the state? I'm not sure what that means, but apparently he didn't get it, so. On September 3rd, 1869, just as he had arrived at Ogden from his home in Logan, he died suddenly while doctoring a sick horse. Yeah, but dying suddenly tends to be either stroke or heart attack related, yes? So I'm guessing it was one of those. His body was conveyed to Logan, where the funeral took place the following Sunday, September 5th. So he did a lot of stuff, and I would say, associating him with the pioneers and the Trek West is pretty appropriate, but also with lots of going on missions, and he was very obedient, Like, I feel like he was just one of those people who were willing to do, you know? And I love that he took as long as he did to join the church, where he wanted to be sure, yeah? He wasn't just going to jump into it, and he wanted to think about it and really study it out in his mind before he made that decision. And once he did, he was 100%. He was an all or nothing kind of a dude, yeah? I don't like how so many people were trying to, like, influence him to, like, do things or not do things. So, I don't know. I think that's a little bit weird. Alright, so let's take a look at the Wikipedia article. Ezra Taft Benson, February 22nd, 1811 to September 3rd, 1869, commonly referred to as Ezra T. Benson to distinguish him from his great-grandson of the same name. See? Was an apostle and member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS Church. Early life. Benson was born in Mendon, Massachusetts on February 22nd, 1811, the son of John Benson and Chloe Taft. His father moved to a farm in Uxbridge, Massachusetts in 1817, where he lived for at least 16 of the next 18 years. Benson married Pamelia, it is Pamelia, not Pamela, Pamelia Andrus of Northbridge on January 1st, 1832 at Uxbridge. They lived at Uxbridge for the next 3 years, between 1832 and 1835. Benson had also lived in Northbridge on his sister's farm in 1830 and 1831. Yeah, they mentioned all of this so far. He and Pamelia had children, one of whom died at Uxbridge in 1833. See, they didn't mention that. Benson managed the Wilson Hotel in the center of Uxbridge and made a considerable sum of money, which he invested in a cotton mill in Holland, Massachusetts. He moved to Holland in 1835 and became postmaster before moving west. Conversion to Mormonism and church leadership. After hearing Joseph Smith speak in a debate against Dr. Nelson, Benson and his wife were baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on July 19th, 1840 in Quincy, Illinois. Okay, that was a gross simplification. They also didn't explain at all how he got there. So that's interesting to me that they just jumped right to it. Like you skipped over like 2 paragraphs. He was then ordained an elder and high priest in 1840. He had moved to Quincy previously and first met the members of the church when they came there at the time they were driven out of Missouri. Okay. Well, that's sort of half okay. Citation needed. Like, we could literally cite the source that we just read, you know. In 1841, Benson moved to Nauvoo. Was that different than Quincy? I guess? Yes, I guess it is. So, sorry about that. While in Nauvoo, Benson served as a night guard for the Nauvoo Temple during its construction. Well, they didn't mention that. That's interesting. Benson was ordained to the office of apostle on July 16, 1846. He replaced John E. Page in the Quorum of the 12. Benson arrived in the Salt Lake Valley as one of the first 148 Mormon settlers with the Vanguard Company of 1847, also known as the Brigham Young Pioneer Company. Yeah. The company left Winter Quarters, Nebraska on April 16, 1847 and arrived in Salt Lake Valley between July 21st and July 24th, 1847. Yeah, we mentioned that. Missionary service. Benson served as a church missionary in the United States, Europe, and the Sandwich Islands. The first mission in 1840s took him to his birthplace of Mendon, Massachusetts. On this journey, he first preached in Chambersburg, Illinois. During his second mission, Benson was in New Jersey, serving with John Pack, and when they received news of Joseph Smith's murder. From December 1844 to May 1845, Benson served a mission to New England, during which he served as president of the Boston Conference. Okay. He was then in charge of the church's missionary efforts in England until the fall of 1857. Oh, they skipped a whole bunch. Like, that's a weird way of saying it. He was then in charge. Like, it sounds like it happened right after this, but like there's like a full 10 years in between. So, he went to the Sandwich Islands in 1864. The boat he was traveling on capsized, but Benson and the other missionaries lived. Yeah. And we mentioned that story. So, political career. Benson served in the Utah Territorial Legislature as a territorial counselor for 10 years. End of sentence. Okay, family. Like many early Latter-day Saints, Benson practiced plural marriage. Okay, we didn't hear about any of his wives besides the first, so I'm interested. On April 27th, 1844, Benson married his first plural wife, Adeline Brooks Andress, the sister of Pamelia. Ooh, I'll bet that was interesting dynamics there. Very, very strange. I know that happened to a couple people, though. Yeah, Mary and Mercy Fielding, yeah, who were both married to Hiram. But to be fair, Mercy Thompson was married before that, yeah. She was married to a guy named Thomas Thompson, something like that. Anyway, after moving to Utah, Benson married Adeline Brooks Andress, Desdemona Fulmer, a widow of Joseph Smith, Eliza Ann Perry, Lucinda West, Elizabeth Gollaher, Olive Mary Knight, and Mary Larson. Benson had 8 wives and 35 children. He also owned a few Paiute slaves. Awesome. It always disappoints me when I find out that somebody was a slave owner. Are you serious? Okay, if you were given the opportunity to buy a person who was being sold as a slave, and you do it, why would you not then offer them their freedom? That's what I'm saying. Like, if you immediately freed them, then I wouldn't have any problems with you. You're just trying to free as many people as possible. But, yeah. Like, just being like, oh, you're now my slave, go and work in my house or something, I don't know. That's very disappointing. Paiute is a Native American tribe. In February 1873, one of Benson's sons, Charles Augustus Charlie Benson, was lynched in Logan, Utah. In Logan, okay, wow, this came out of nowhere. After an altercation in which he likely shot and killed a man and then tried to escape. This is really strange, and I feel like it doesn't reflect on Ezra Benson at all, because that's his son who did that, not himself. So, and it was also after his death. But it does surprise me that somebody... Okay, so let's get this straight. Charlie Benson shot and killed a man during an altercation. He was caught and hanged in Logan, Utah. I mean, it really was the Wild West, was it not? It's so surprising to me when I hear about stuff like this. Wild, Wild West. Alright. I'm not going to put too much weight on that. I feel like, once again, it doesn't reflect on Ezra Benson, really. It reflects on his son. And it's his son's responsibility to act the way he feels is correct, not his father. Yeah? And, yeah. Anyway, so, but that's very unfortunate. Benson's great-grandson, also named Ezra Taft Benson, also became an apostle of the LDS Church. The younger Benson served as U.S. Secretary of Agriculture in the 1950s and President of the LDS Church from 1985 to 1994, and we have an entire, hour 40-minute video on him. So if you're interested, I don't know, I'll leave a link down below or something like that. Anyway, death and burial. Benson died suddenly from a heart attack on September 3rd, 1869, while in Ogden, Utah Territory. Oh, he did have a heart attack. So they said he collapsed when he was tending a sick horse. Yeah. He was 58 years old. He is buried in the Logan City Cemetery in Logan, Utah. See also Taft family. Okay. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the references. Page was disfellowshipped and removed from the quorum. Page was subsequently excommunicated from the church. I think we know that. We just did a video on him 2 weeks ago. George M. McCune, Personalities in the Doctrine and Covenants and Joseph Smith History. Okay, I'll bet that's interesting. And then Ezra Taft Benson, 1811 to 1869, Brigham Young University, archived from the original, and that was written in 2014. Early Saints, BOAP.org, archived from the original, 2014. Okay. Pioneer Overland Travel, Brigham Young Company, Ezra Taft Benson, The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, archived from the original, 2015. Yeah. Sherry Dew, Ezra Taft Benson, A Biography. Okay, so it's like his ancestry and stuff. Written in 1987. I don't know how to pronounce this. Andres Resendez, or is it Resende? Andre Resende, something like that. The Other Slavery, the uncovered story of Indian enslavement in America, page 275. Wow. Huh. In A.J. Simmons, The Gentile Comes to Cache Valley, a study of the Logan apostasies of 1874 and the establishment of non-Mormon churches in Cache Valley. Okay, so that's about the altercation with the son, yeah? The Family of Ezra T. Benson, 1811 to 1869, bensonfamily.org. Really? 2014. Okay, so there's an actual website if you're interested in looking up more about that. There you go. That was really interesting. I feel like he was a very interesting person in that he was so willing to just go and do, and I love how zealous he was once he was convinced of something. And that's kind of a pattern. Like, we see that a lot in the leadership of the church. They're just 100% with everything if they are with it. If they are agree with something, then they agree 100%. If they think something is right, then they just throw their whole lives into it. And I feel like Ezra T. Benson was one of those people. He seems very willing to work, very willing to get up and do. And I do not think that the actions of his children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren reflect badly on him. I think that he did his best in life, and that what they did was their own decisions. So, yeah, I found that really, really fascinating, and I hope you learned something today, and if you did, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.